Welcome back to my Union Legendary playthrough using the Rebalance mod. I have played back through the campaign up to Shiloh using 1.25, and I've gotten back to more or less the same place. The AI army size is a bit larger, their weapons are a bit higher, and training is a bit lower. I'm bringing in more or less same number of men. I'm facing slightly less than what I was facing with 1.24. If you want to see more details on how my army has changed, check out the camp video. So, unlike last time, I'm having to use a slightly different setup. I'm only bringing in 3 artillery units, having to place them further back because of the AI counter battery and the fact that I'm going to have to be retreating. And I brought in a skirmisher unit to help delay the AI. Um, Also, I've sped the video up 2x for everything, and I'm also using a much faster fast forward setting. I think I'm at like 40x speed with fast forward on. It's close to what I usually use when testing, just because it speeds things up so much. So I've got my light infantry unit down there, just sort of plinking away and stopping the AI's progression. They seem to, whenever they hit something, they seem to stop and then wait for the rest of their units to pull up. I moved the general forward to try and draw off the unit, some units to the northwest. I'm sort of going the opposite of my plan on 1.24, where I tried to keep them in the middle. This time I want to sort of stretch them out to the side. Optimally, I don't want to have them go up along the eastern map edge at all. I'd like to be able to move Loomis further over or have him hit the flanks of the units. I got kind of lucky in that the AI had the speed perk, so it is out ahead of the infantry. So I'm able to take some pot shots at the artillery. I got unlucky in that Trigg's unit split, but maintained almost its full size. So there's a 700 extra artillery on the field than normal. So I did get lucky, and the unit that was chasing my general decided not to charge. If you can get them to charge, you can wear them out real nice, which can turn out really well. But instead, they're going to walk into the water, and we're just going to be able to take them apart there. Just slowly retreating the skirmisher unit. I kind of want to keep him there as long as possible and let him just keep. Basically, I want the AI to come forward, see my unit stop, try and set up, and then have to slowly move forward again. You have to be a little careful with when you choose to cross the river because you can get mauled by infantry if you do it at the wrong time. But we got really lucky here, and we managed to get a hidden position, and where we can't technically see their artillery, but we can still shoot at it. And the second Trig Brigade is going really far to the east and really far up, which is a little unusual. But we're going to take advantage of that and do some damage to them with our infantry. Probably should have run Gibbon's Brigade down there as well to get a shot on. I only just now do it. But if I'd run him at the same time I started moving Loomis, I probably could have gotten multiple volleys in. So because the artillery does so much less damage in 1.25, the just murder the AI in place tactic doesn't really work anymore. I tried it a few times with my 1.24 army, and it just I held for a little while, and eventually I just got overwhelmed, especially because we made some changes to the AI charge logic, so it's more aware of the power the perks give it, and it is considerably more aggressive now. So I've got several units going up on the west, which is good. So I'm pushing my infantry forward to try and hit it in the flanks and sort of pin them there in the open for as long as I can. Uh, as, lo- as long as I can keep in good positions, I'll stay here as long as possible. But the part where we still have several units in the middle and Claiborne is really far east, which is really bad actually. If he was more in the center, we'd be in much better shape. Because right now it's a one-on-one fight with Loomis, and well, with the 24 pounders working, I'll win that fight, but I'm not going to win it long term. So focusing my artillery on the charging unit, I'm having to back out of the first line of trees. There's just like, as you can see, charge canceling is a little bit less effective than it used to be. I've sort of figured out some ways to get it to mostly work, but previously I just kept them pinned to the river, and this time they're much harder to discourage. I will note Franklin's position is really not great. I'm not entirely sure what is going on with the cover there, but that is in actual buildings. You only get like 70% cover. It's a little unfortunate. That position actually be pretty decent otherwise. And I'm kind of trying to shift Walton and Scales over to the east because if they get charged again, if they retreat into the swamp, those units would just probably flat out die. You lose so much condition in the swamp that it doesn't matter what happens, you're just screwed. But this is going pretty well. They're shooting at Franklin instead of my really good units, and I can keep hitting those guys in the open. I had to retreat Loomis to get away from Claiborne. Probably going to have to start pushing the artillery back soon. We got our reinforcements, so we'll see what we can get up to with the cavalry. But definitely playing much more of a delaying action here. Like, I don't want to give up the church too early because this is actually pretty good defensive terrain, and I want to wear them out some more and get it there, get in the back lines if I can. But I'm also not trying to hold as far forward as I previously did. This lets the AI stretch out a little bit more, and the further apart I can keep those units, the less charge power it thinks it has, and that will hopefully save it from just overrunning me. On the upside, compared to the 1.24 version, they got far fewer infantry splits than in this version. Not that I changed anything, I just got luckier. It's probably a good thing. I would guess if I had faced the same amount of units that I had in 1.24, I'm not sure if I would have come through this. Or if I had, I'm not sure if I would have had an army left at the end of it. So I've backed up my artillery some more. You can see they've taken a decent amount of losses already just from collateral damage. Our collateral damage went up for artillery in 1.25, so it's a little more dangerous now. And I'm sort of putting my rookie musket brigades up there to try and draw some fire to save my other units because they're going to take a lot of losses over the course of the battle. So I've got my cavalry behind the lines, but I have to watch out for their cavalry. Fortunately, Avery decided to drive home the charge, and he just destroys that set of units. The good news is he walked right into canister range, so we can get lucky and just get rid of him entirely. The problem is we have to present Loomis's flank to get away with it. Maybe the artillery would have lasted, but I really couldn't afford to let that unit sit back there. So now I'm stuck falling back sideways with Loomis, so we're going to keep taking flanking shots, which isn't really good. And falling the artillery even further back because there's definitely a unit back there that is doing counter battery, and it's starting to hurt already. Having the AI actually target your artillery when it can see it changes the game a whole lot. And Lindsay decided to charge, so we hid in the woods and hit him just as he came into the woods. This gives us sort of the maximal damage while giving us some cover from his initial charge. And if we can get rid of the cavalry, that really opens up our options a lot. The 2 cavalry start that I did here, if their cavalry splits a couple of times, your cavalry is probably going to be largely useless for most of the battle because it's just really, really hard to try and win against 3 or 4 better cavalry units back there. So for a first phase, this is going all right. We've had to give up the church. We've done some decent damage to their cavalry, done some decent damage to their artillery. done okay on the infantry. It's going to be a long process grinding those guys down. We weren't able to get a supply wagon early, the first supply wagon, which is not great. But I've had very bad luck trying to get that thing in the current version. It just the way the timing works out, it just isn't as feasible to get it. I think part of that is because the infantry perks now give less move speed, the infantry tends to stay with the other units a little bit better, so you don't get the really easy pickoffs anymore. So that charge by Russell is really worrying. We got Lindsay again. We're taking fire from Tyler, which isn't great, but I think that's a 10-pound parrot unit, so he's not going to do a whole lot close range. We get lucky with that charge cancel. We were about to get into the swamp, and that could have gone bad, but we do a lot of damage to Russell, and now we can keep getting Walton out of there. Get an early shatter. It's always good. So now there's no cavalry on the field for them. So hopefully I can get some more done back there. Gibbon and Franklin are taking a lot of losses. Not a lot I can do about it. Going larger would be nice, but scaling kicks in really hard in this battle. And even with, I brought, I think 5-6 infantry units total, and they're 1,000 apiece, more or less. And, you can see what I'm facing. But this is a pretty good exchange. They're in cover, but we've got all our artillery focusing on them at pretty close range. Other than that 10-pounder that the AI probably has, because it could be a 14-pounder, but probably not, because that canister shell would have hurt a lot more on my cavalry. But their other cannon is probably 12-pounders, and those are really terrible unless they bring them up super close. So they're not going to be doing too much damage to my units, thankfully, even though they are quite large. You can see that collateral damage coming through. And Trig's pushing up again. One of the changes we made to the AI in this version is when they limber up, we tried to get them to come closer than their maximum effective range, because in the base game the AI will basically move until it has something in maximum range and then fire at it. So we're trying to get a lot of the shorter ranged artillery that is better up close to actually come closer and be effective. We'll see how it works out. It seems to be a net positive so far, though sometimes the 12-pounders with their relatively short range do get a little too close. But in this case, I really can't take advantage of it. They're going to pound me with canister if they see me. So, and with only a few minutes left before the phase ends, with losing the church, I'm starting to pull everything back. I'm leaving my rookie musket units there to draw fire, and I'm trying to get everything out, because I'm going to fall back in the next phase. I'm going to fall back to where my skirmishes are on the eastern side of the map. So overall, pretty happy with this first phase. If I could have gotten both wagons, that would have been great. I also wasn't able to get the wagons up to my own troops, but that 3 logistics that I have is paying dividends, and no one's really out of ammo yet. All right, on to the weaker flank. So as you can see here, we have 1 infantry unit and a bunch of pseudo infantry units in terms of skirmishers armed with rifles. And so in a lot of ways, those skirmishers armed with rifles are actually better than the infantry at 1 star, because they have 75 accuracy as opposed to 50. I'm still not sure. Maybe that's too good, but there's no way to get charge damage on those skirmishers, and there's no way to get them larger than 1,000. So I think after a point they're going to sort of start falling off. But for this battle, especially with how the scaling works, it's definitely worthwhile to have more skirmishers. I'm not sure if that might not be worth it outside of, it might be worth it on Major General. Anything lower, I don't think I would do it, just because all those units are basically going to have to be disbanded afterwards. So I've got my good light infantry on the western map edge. I'm going to try and get some flank shots in there. I really want to try and get the AI to come out into that open field and sort of stand around there where I can hit them. I pulled my infantry all the way back to try and get Hodgins to come forward so I can get some shots in on him, because otherwise he's just going to sit there all battle. But you do want to be really careful because it's pretty easy for AI infantry to go along the western map edge, and then it'll be in cover, and then it gets hard to hold the position around the flag. Also with this setup, I'm really committing to the center. If the AI decides to go hard on my left flank, I really don't have anything to stop it, and we just go through an early phase change. I just give up that VP, and not much I can do about it. So the charge from Pond's actually pretty good. We're going to move up the melee skirmishers to insight, and that gets the cancel. Unfortunately, that reveals our skirmishers on the left. Trying to get them out of there. And it takes the flag, which is a little early. Like the setup so far, the AI is relatively passive, and there's not massive splits or anything. So it would actually be better to not have that contested timer kicking down already, so we could deal a little more damage. But that can also get you into trouble, where if they don't take it, then you have that full 30 minutes, and your position can collapse really badly, really quickly, and there's just unless you get lucky and one of their units gets up on the northern map edge and triggers the phase early, then that can be a disaster. So I could move forward and take that flag back now, but I think it's better just to, there's that huge 3-star unit coming up, so I don't really want to push my luck. Fortunately, that 3-star unit decides to stop. I actually probably should have pulled back so it wouldn't do that. It'd move closer, because when it stopped, it caused Pawn to shift to the left, even though he was wavering, which gets him into cover and means that I can't sit there with my light infantry unit and just keep hitting them in the flanks over and over and over. So that was a little unfortunate. Maybe if I'd kept Gibbon firing, that unit would have fully routed, but I'm not sure if I had the damage. And you can see Gibson on their right, just he's really trying to go towards that flag and keep sort of seeing skirmishers and then stopping, and then I'll move him back out of sight, and then he'll try and move again. So those units aren't doing a ton of good work, but they're slowly inflicting casualties. And every bit I can do now is less that I have to deal with around the Hornets list later. So Jackson gets into the woods. That isn't great. Hopefully we can get him out with canister. But the good news is, even though these units are fairly experienced, they're, well, Jackson at least doesn't seem like he has accuracy perks, or he just has a really bad weapon or something, because he's doing relatively little per shot. I have 100% cover, but still. Hopefully we can get Chalmers to stop. It was good we got him to stop. It's bad that it's going to cause a shift, because they stopped on top of each other. But if Chalmers had kept going, that would have been really bad, because I could throw every single unit I have on the field into him in a charge, and I would probably lose. So at this point, it's a good thing they took the flag early and I didn't try and take it back, because with 5 minutes left, I can start pulling everything back and wait for the phase change and then just retreat out of this area. Because we're just outnumbered by so much, and we don't have enough damage to try and whittle down these units anymore. So this phase could probably go a little bit better if you manage to get better units into your army. I sacrificed a lot to get more 2-stars as opposed to have more 1-stars here, which, I don't know, it seemed like it worked out, but means that you really just have trouble burning through the numbers of Confederate troops on this side, and just have to fall back. Okay, so with my units in the west, I'm going to try and take up that rectangular tree line to the west of the Hornet's Nest. and I'm going to try and take the line sort of right along with the hornet's nest on my left flank. It's mostly going to be skirmishers and crappy artillery backing stuff up, but hopefully that'll be enough to discourage the AI from being too aggressive until it really pulls everything up, and then we'll pull back again. And we'll be able to get ammo to all these units. I was probably a little behind schedule on moving these units on the west back into those woods. Like, it'd be optimal to sort of be hitting those positions right about now, but good enough. And we have those musket skirmishers, which are sort of holding units in place to give the rest of my units time to back up. So I'm going to see if I can get that wagon, maybe if I can hit that artillery, because that 3-star artillery unit I'm pretty sure is a 10-pound parrot, and he is going to wreck my artillery if I leave him on the field. That's another way this battle can go really badly if they have higher tech, and you get unlucky with the randomized rolls. If they end up with like 2 to 3 units of 10-pounder parrots, you're going to have a really hard time keeping your artillery alive on the field. On the upside, those units stay further back, so you'll have an easier time getting them with cavalry. Fortunately, Anderson routed up into the swamp, and Dury is getting chased by Johnson, which is not a real good situation. Maybe I probably should have turned Walton around right now and started hitting that unit in the side. Maybe my 3-star unit would have been good enough to rout that guy and help get my musket skirmishers out of there in better shape. But we made our escape from the south pretty well. So yeah, you can see he's just getting absolutely crushed. So yeah, if I turned Walton around and turned Scales on him, maybe I could have routed him in time. But you can see Scales is already taking flanking fire, so I decided to more or less give those units up. They got the rest of my important units out, which is the important part. If that charge had gone into one of my good infantry units, that would have probably ended the battle right there. Those 3 core infantry units just do so much damage over the course of the battle that losing more of them would have been really, really bad. So I'm also sending my little tiny sniper unit over. Basically what I'm expecting to happen is for their unit to melee mine into the swamp, at which point their condition is going to drop like a rock, and then those units are going to sit there and do no damage to each other. So my plan is to just have that little tiny sniper unit and my other musket unit just sit there and fire at them over and over. And they aren't going to do a ton of damage, but they'll probably keep them from recovering in any way. And just maybe I'll save the other musket unit, but probably not. One of the changes also in 1.25 is shattered units do return to camp now. I don't entirely know why they don't in the base game. Probably just a difficulty thing, but there's no real reason for them not to. It's already really bad if a unit gets low enough that it can shatter in the first place, so it's a small consolation prize if you screw up and lose a unit. So you can start to see the defensive line I'm going to try and hold for the next several hours. In some ways, it would actually be better to just maybe give this area up entirely and let them take the Hornet's Nest early. But if you can see, there's a 2-hour and 15-minute contested timer for Shiloh Church that resets at the start of this phase, even if they had already captured it. And this phase won't end unless there are enemy units on the north edge of the map or that timer is run down. So you have to be able to hold here for several hours. There's no way to phase transition earlier. Oh, just lost a decent officer, but I think that was the first officer we lost so far, so that's actually pretty lucky. I don't have any points in medicine, so the officer wound and kill rates are higher than they are in the base game. That's another change we made in 1.25. As you get medicine, you can drop it back down, but for the early game, it's probably going to experience a little more loss with officers, but at least the replacement system is there to help you out a little bit. So going for the wagon, got my setup in the corner. We'll hopefully just slowly grind that 3-star unit down. If I can trade a 2,000 man 3-star unit for 1,000 odd rookie musketmen, that's a good deal. Not a sustainable deal, sustainable rate, but I'll take it for that in one case. Unfortunately, we get the wagon and then have to leave right away because Jenkins is sitting there. Even at 0-star, Jenkins is big enough that he can destroy your cavalry if you aren't careful. We get the split on Ammon, which is really nice. Any splits you can get on these units that come in will just save your units more and more, which you can see is starting to become a problem. I've got units that are down in the 500, 600 range, and we've got a lot of battle left. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with Anderson in the corner there. I'll cover that again in a second. So you can see I'm going with the same plan, sitting in cover as Jenkins comes in, try and hit him just as he goes through the water with our pistol fire, and then double charge him. And then we'll run him down as long as we can. You do really want to be careful to pull off before your units get too low in stamina, because if they get, once they drop below 50%, they're useless for a good chunk of the battle. So recovered Duryi, except he gets routed with the routing volley, which is both a good change because the AI doesn't stand around and get shot at over and over, but it's also it is infuriating when it happens. I can't say I like it, but it is probably a net benefit for the AI. It was just the abuse cases before that was implemented are just ridiculous. So yeah, Duryi finally shattered, so I'm going to pull Anderson out of there, or at least try to, and get the snipers out. We did pretty decent damage to Jenkins. We're going to follow him a little bit longer. I'm not sure why Anderson is not doing anything over there. He must have muskets, and I guess I don't know. I just am not sure what is going on with the AI there. That unit's going to sit there for the next 3 hours and not fire at anything. I can't route him with the units I have over there, but he's just going to sit there. Not sure what's going on. So I try and get some snipers forward to hit that unit. Doesn't work out. So now I have to run. And they're starting to bring up all their units. But we've got our reinforcements coming in, so that I'm going to be able to move them into positions to start taking the brunt of some of that fire, which will let my good units sit around the flanks and snipe at things. So I see Jackson. Now we want to get the heck out of there. Also, we need to rest. The bad news of Woods charging that skirmisher unit is that he's going to be in cover in sort of the middle of my line where I don't really have a lot of units right now. The good news is it'll wear him out. I'm taking more artillery damage. You can see I've taken a whole lot of my Napoleons. Just nothing I can do about it until I can get that counter battery unit and slow things down so that I'm not taking collateral damage. I'm just going to keep losing guns. So Woods has gone a little further than I wanted, but we'll be able to bring the 3-star unit over, and he should be able to deal with that pretty good. It was a lot of work keeping that unit intact enough to get 3 stars. It was worth every penny in this battle. I think that guy ends up with 5,000-6,000 kills. You have to be really careful with him because he's super expensive to maintain, but he does really good work. So going to move the snipers up a little bit more. Hopefully we can get on the flanks of those units and start getting them out of there. Now I want to try and start shoving stuff more in the center, because the more I can get on things flanks, the better. Jenkins is coming after us again, which is good. Starting the counter battery work. It's going to be slow. They have a lot of men, and I don't have particularly good units for it, but if I can get rid of them, all the better. So got the wood route. That 3-star unit earning its work. Anderson's still sitting there. Don't know why. Gonna abuse it. Yeah, I'm not sure. He can see units. He probably is in range. He probably doesn't have muskets. He could, but I don't know. So yeah, this is going pretty well so far. We've made it, almost 30 minutes. And the AI hasn't grouped up too heavily on us yet, but they're starting to get in there. I'm a little far back into the woods with this line here, but with the angles, I just can't afford to be much farther forward, and those units are taking enough damage that I just want them further back from the artillery. And so it's not the best situation, but there's not a whole lot I can do about it right now. Letting the cavalry rest up some more. This is getting dangerous, especially that 5,000 man unit. That's really worrying. He can roll this entire line if he gets the right charge off. Wood's coming back up again. That's dangerous, but we've got some units there. We should be able to hopefully drive him off. Statham's charging. But it looks like he stopped when we backed up a little bit. There's still enough units there that's probably a spot where the charge calculation still isn't working correctly. I need to find a way to make the AI value HP more than the other stats, because that unit is large enough that even if the rest of its stats go down really far, it is still going to absolutely roll those smaller units. So something to work on in the future. But Statham's also running in a completely unsupported area, so that's probably the reason. He's seeing all those units around him, and the units behind him are just sort of sitting there. I'm not entirely sure why, but I guess the AI likes his reserves. We'll call it that. So, what, 6th attempt at that supply wagon? Something like that. So I'm switching my 12-pounders over to try and get canister on that 5,000 man unit. Hopefully keep his morale low and keep him from charging. Also, the unit's just going to do better when it's doing canister, so might as well. Starting to have trouble getting these charges to cancel. Just barely got it that time around, but now he's going to take 24-pounder. The 24-pounder is geared for double canister damage, so that's the best troop killer that I can basically put on the field. So him being right in front of it is good news. He probably won't last another volley. But now they've made it into the trees, which is not great for me. Getting close to the point where I need to abandon that position. One of their artillery units is in the water. That's great. Now that terrain actually reduces damage, that unit is going to be doing very little while it's sitting there. So we finally got unlucky with the cavalry. I'm surprised this didn't happen earlier. Wandered straight into 2 infantry units sitting back there, and their cavalry. I'm very fortunate that I don't lose both cavalry units right there. So you can see I'm trying to find some units that are not, or they can afford to take some more damage, because we're under 500 with a lot of those, so I really need to get them out of there. Going to start getting into shatter range, and we still got a long way to go. but we got lucky. We made it out with the cavalry, and part of that is we got lucky and we killed off Avery and we killed off I can't remember the other's name, but we got the 2 units on from the first phase, and we got a lot of damage on Jenkins. So Jenkins is in bad shape and not able to just chase us down really quickly. Oh, lost another officer. I think that was on the AI unit. Sort of shuffling my line, trying to get stuff out of collateral damage and have a nice spread so that if a unit folds, I can throw something into the gap and until I can get something better in line. Trying to get my 3-pounder working on the enemy artillery. It's going to be slow going again. It's probably one of the more significant artillery changes is the 3-pounder's curve was changed. So now it is actually pretty effective out to all ranges. You could probably think of it as a, worse 20-pounder parrot in terms of how it works now. The 3-pounder was originally designed to have a very high damage range, and as far as I can tell, like Game Labs decided to give it a really bad curve because of that. And now that we've sort of standardized the damages a bit more, that really bad curve meant the the weapon was largely useless. And as far as I know, the 3-inch was actually supposed to be pretty good out to long range. So I'm not sure why it had terrible long range damage in the base game. But we have fixed that, so it is a pretty good all-around weapon now. So artillery or cavalry is almost rested up. Sort of rolling the dice here with Statham. I'm just not doing enough damage to counteract his damage, so eventually he's going to start breaking through there. Let's see, I'm doing all right, but you could definitely tell that my line is having trouble holding at this point. But we've still got another hour and 20 minutes until the next phase opens up and we can retreat again. So have to make it work. And you can see that 3-star unit has finally recovered from the swamp over there and is starting to move over, which is bad news for me. Can't keep the snipers on the flank anymore. And these units are starting to run out of ammo, so I need to get more stuff over to them. At this point, I also realized that I had the 2nd Brigade of Ammon in a position where it wasn't taking damage, and I had the 1st Brigade where it was taking damage. This ends up not mattering because they're both going to die before the day ends, but in general, if you get a split, you want to try and use the 2nd unit before the 1st unit because the 1st unit's the one that's going to sit around and if there's a 2nd day, will actually show up on the field again. The 2nd unit will just despawn. So run right into Jenkins. I thought he was there. I think I saw him on the mini-map for some reason, even though he wasn't really visible. But hopefully we can just kill him off. Another charge from Statham as I tried to pull Ammon out. Hopefully we can stop this. Get lucky again, but no, now he's in better cover, even though he's in point-blank canister range from that 12-pounder and has multiple artillery firing at him. He just gains so much morale back on every shot that I just can't get rid of him. But the more damage we can do to him now, the safer we're going to be on the landing, because those giant units are what can just completely roll you later in the game. So got rid of the last of their cavalry. They cleared out one of those wagons that was up near the front line. The good news, at least, is that now they're going to start running out of ammunition. I probably could have brought my captured wagon out and around at this point. Maybe not with Johnson hidden in the fog over there. Probably couldn't sneak it through. But I've got enough supply that I can hold out for a while longer. So I don't think I'll actually need to end up using the AI supply. which means I probably could have spent more money on something else and put less into supply, but my army just absolutely falls apart if it runs out of supply, since it's so fire-based. So I just really wanted to have as much leeway as I could there. So the artillery is all set up, and they're starting to just uh, route all of my skirmish units that I have holding the line here. And my cavalry, well, it's cleared theirs from the field, but I'm down to half strength with one unit and 2/3 strength with the other. So only going to be able to not going to be too able to be too adventurous with them for the rest of the battle. And a lot of infantry starting to stockpile in the middle here. So you can see my line's starting to fall apart there. And this is where I'm starting to think, okay, I'm not sure I can hold this any longer. I think I have to fall back to the next line and start giving the fallback orders for all of my artillery and any units in the back line. And once they've cleared out, then I will retreat the rest of it. So we're doing okay on the left here, but they're starting to really get into the trees. So that defensive position really is not much of a bonus anymore. And then we get the really worrying charge from Statham, where it's straight into an artillery unit, which thankfully I had already given the order, so it was mostly limbered up. And since it's a 12-pounder, it's as fast as an artillery is going to be by default. But I'm really worried at this point that unit is just going to get completely rolled over, and I'm going to lose 2 units instantly. So I'm going around to the west with the cavalry because I keep getting spotted when I go up through the north. So I'm going to try and arc around near the Shiloh Church VP and see if I can stay hidden there. As I know there's that 10-pounder unit, I really want to get rid of it. Get really lucky, fortunate again there, and that Statham stops, which means I don't lose both of those units, or at least the artillery. The artillery was dead if Statham didn't stop. Tyler might have been able to rout away. So starting to back up everything. I don't think we're going to be able to cancel that one, so we'll probably have to go into melee there. So just checking which one would be better for melee. Dumping him in there. He'll last a little bit longer, even though he won't win. Countercharge now that we're in melee. Send some extra units to help out and provide supporting fire. My unit will probably rout from the friendly fire, but at least I'll get him to rout. Lost one of our division commanders, which is terrible. So this is the point of the battle where I was getting pretty worried. This retreat was not going particularly smoothly, and we still have a whole hour left. I'm pretty much banking on the units in the southwest being really slow to move up and engage because there's just not enough space to form a good defensive line further back from where I am. But we routed the charge at least, so pulling everything else out. We got into Tyler, so try and do what damage we can there. In terms of getting units out of melee, the most effective thing I've found at the moment is mashing spacebar to try and get a halt out of them. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if it's the mod or if it's the something that was there in the base game, but it seems to be happening to me more recently. Units seem to get stuck on each other more, and like I'll hit fallback, and they'll like try and shove the unit forward, because it feels like the unit's getting like dragged away from its center, and the sprites are not where the game thinks the rest of the unit is. So you hit fall back, and it has like the sprites actually move closer to where the game thinks the unit is to try and back up. So that's why I just mash hold position a lot, and that's that, or giving a move order just directly away the direction you want fallback to work seems to be more effective at the moment. Okay, so we routed Tyler. Didn't manage to kill him. Took counter battery. You can tell those units have rotation speed either from the general or from the unit perk, which is very effective at keeping cavalry away from them. Because I can't afford to take too many more hits like that, and otherwise those units are going to fall apart. So this is the second defensive line that I'm going to hold. You can see the position is pretty decent. One problem is you tend to start losing vision of stuff south of your line along the river, which isn't great. But it's a pretty decent line, and you can get from there back to the landing fairly easily. So for another 45 minutes, it'll have to do. And you can see I'm sort of holding in the center a little bit. I'd like to get out of there more. But sort of running out of space to put these units, and you can tell my army is getting pretty beat up at this point. A whole lot of units that really just can't afford to be in a position where they take fire anymore. You can see them moving to target order. So now if you give an order to artillery that causes them to have to push themselves forward to hit it, you'll get a sound and a warning pop up, so that you know that that's happening, and they don't accidentally wander halfway across the field and into an enemy unit, which is only really a problem in a few battles, but it's really aggravating when it happens. So now you have a little bit more chance of noticing. It does seem to trigger a little more than it should, but overall I think it works pretty well. So I want to try and get after Tyler again, because I know I have a ton of artillery up there that's all exposed and I can't get it hidden, and if that 10-pounder is allowed to just blast away, I'm not going to have any artillery anymore. And again, when I come into the middle here, I'm just always spotted by something, and I'm not really sure what it is. I don't know if there's infantry units there that I can't see. There's no spotting bonus. There's no vision point anywhere, so that shouldn't be it. But I don't know. Every time I go through there, I'm always spotted immediately, and it takes me, 8 tries before I really realize I have to go a different direction. And those units really should rest up more before I use them again. So what I'm trying to set up here is some skirmishers that are hidden and able to fire while the enemy just sits there. They're being polite and not pursuing me. If those infantry units sitting there would push me real hard, I would have to try and retreat even further to the east, and I think things would get really ugly. We've only got 30 minutes left, but that's be a long time if this stuff pushed really hard. But they seem more content to charge me sporadically and shoot at me, so that's good news for me. So moving some supporting units, I'm just assuming that unit's going to get into melee. And we're just going to do as much damage as we can to that unit. So just trying to get my units out of there. Lost a major. I think that was one of the musket units. So no big loss. A captain will do all right there. Them spreading out close to the river is not great for me, but if I can make it to the next phase, and those units are going to be real close to the gunboats, and the gunboats will probably rout them. So bringing everything across again, I'm assuming I'm going to have to give up this area. But we got the beat off the charge, did a lot of damage to that unit. Didn't take too many losses doing it. I keep swinging those cavalry units around thinking I'm going to be able to get to something without just blundering into a infantry unit. Not sure why. But you can see a lot of units are getting real small. Definitely need to get back to the landing where we have a better defensive position. But I think overall this plan worked fairly well. We were able to retreat in phases, catch the enemy out in relatively decent defensive positions multiple times. Inflict a lot of damage, wear them out, let them charge. Yeah, this is getting really iffy on this left here. So once again, I get spotted. I run straight through the middle, run into some infantry that's still sitting there. Should have realized that, but. And thankfully, you can see the units that were on their left have lost sight of my units in the center and seem to just be deciding to sort of move into the middle now, which is good news in that they're walking around and not attacking me. So trying to get the snipers in a spot where they can shoot at something. Got to be careful with them because they are really unmaneuverable. So here's where you can see the vision is just not great. Like I can sort of I can target units there, but I can't actually see them. So that's the downside of this position. But we've more or less, you can see, I noticed that Perry has been taking fire, so I'm trying to back him off and preserve him for later. Starting to have officers drop now, though I think that was another allied one. So spot a artillery unit out in the open, so I'm going to go out and around and try and get to him. Another worrying charge by a 3-star, but we managed to stop him. Thankfully, my firepower is enough that I'm managing to let them get close enough that they see the huge pile of units and decide that coming forward is a bad idea. And I'm managing to get them to route far enough back that they're not just all piling up right in front of me. Because that's where the really dangerous charges happen, is when the charge stops relatively close to you, and then more units pile up behind it, and then suddenly the AI thinks, oh, I've got all these units here, and then 5 or 6 units all come in at once, and that's when you can just get swept if you get unlucky. And I just don't have enough in the field over there to do anything about it, so I'm really banking on that, counting down the minutes until that phase changed at this point. Bringing some of the skirmishers over. I'm hoping to hit some more stuff in the flank over there. Bringing Bruce down kind of just to provide cover for those skirmishers in case there's a unit that I don't know about. So you can see I've pushed them off pretty decently. They're not being too aggressive at the moment, but they've got the artillery advantage, and those are just sort of beating on me slowly. And over here on my left, I just don't really have anything to deal with this unit. I'd need larger units or better units to try and rout that guy. But overall, this phase has gone fairly well. Getting those retreats to be clean is the most important part. You can lose the battle instantly if you screw up and lose a bunch of artillery or something. So got a little too ambitious moving him forward, so gonna have to shift stuff so I don't take fire again, because really want to keep that unit intact. Perry's taking even more damage from the counter battery at this point. But I guess it's better than my good artillery. I think Perry's a Napoleon. But you can see Tyler just sitting there. The only good news is he's sitting in the tree line, so he's doing 30% less damage than he could. But that's still enough. But as you can see, I'm really lucky there aren't more of those 10-pounders. If there were, like, all of this artillery out in the open over here would probably be gone. Or at least I'd have to have it so far back that it wouldn't be particularly helpful. But we're able to get the cavalry into this unit. Stuart's just standing there, which is real nice. And I think the general will actually be blocking him if he spun around. So I managed to pick him off. I've got my counter battery working on what I can. I guess that's worth mentioning. Artillery does have different ranges now. It's not nearly as standardized as it was in 1.24. So the 10-pound Parrot is 1150. The 3-inch is 1250. The James is 1300, 1350. I don't remember for sure. And then I think the 20-pound Parrot goes up to 1500. The Whitworth is 1800, and the Siege is 1700, I believe. Most of the smoothbores are sitting around 900 or 1000. So that gives a little more variety again. All right, so we made it to the landing. Now to run away, because this line is definitely no longer sustainable in any way. And now that we're at the phase where the AI is actually going to try and get after us again, it's going to go for the landing. So we definitely can't keep sitting there anymore. But we've got the gunboats now; those will help a little bit. We've got the fortifications, which are not bad, but my units are in general just not in good enough shape to actually really use them anymore. And it spreads the units out enough that they're going to get hit from so many sides that the fortifications really aren't beneficial for my army outside of jumping in briefly for dealing with charges, just for the melee. So the melee bonus and when a unit is in the fortification, they don't qualify as moving during melee, so your condition drain is a lot less than it would be otherwise. So you can see the same basic pattern for the retreat. Leave some units, leave some skirmishers forward to delay the enemy, and pull everything else back. When their infantry starts going forward, I'm going to see if I can pick off that 10-pound Parrot again. And once everything starts getting up there, then I'll spend some time organizing it. So that went pretty well. Mostly disengaged. I'm going to put the skirmishers over on my right flank. That's usually a pretty good open area. The AI is going to push really hard into this triangle of woods here and towards the flag. So you can usually get skirmishers out on your right, though you do have to be pretty careful because sometimes units will come up there, and if you get a unit to charge or something, it can, be real bad. And you've got the swamp behind you, so we don't really need to see that wonderful carousel of pain again. Can't really afford to be losing any more units at this point. But you can see from the landing you have much better sight lines than you did at the position I was at. So we're going to be able to have better vision and get rid of that artillery and stuff. So setting up the artillery up here is a little tricky. You really need probably 3 or 4 good smoothbore canister units sitting right above that triangle because that's where a lot of the charges are going to come in. And there's a huge radius on, as best I know, the way that the VP works here is there's some sort of giant circle, and it does a force calculation of who has more men there, and whichever side has more men takes the point, which means they can get basically right up to the edge of the fortifications and take the point, which can be a problem. So that's why I put a lot of smoothbore artillery right up there. Just it's not going to keep them from charging, but it means whenever something does charge in and get into those woods, that we'll probably be able to blow it back out before it sits there for too long. Because if it sits there and then gets up enough to charge or let another unit charge through it, then you're probably screwed. So I try hopping into the fortifications here. It's going to be a mistake. Just because of the larger coverage. Again, the bonuses are pretty decent, especially so that's one of the things. So this fortification is technically in the woods. So if you were standing in the woods, you'd take the heavy woods penalty. If you're in the fortification, then you don't take any terrain penalties. Still makes fortifications questionable in a lot of cases, but it's at least evening the balancing out a little bit in terms of their favor. So you can see I've stacked up a ton of units in that central spot. It's the most important part of my line. And then I've got all of my little tiny units that I can't really afford to have on the front line anymore. They're all backing up the left flank, which the AI doesn't push quite as hard, but they can go after you sometimes and need to have stuff there to stop it. Ammon is my bait brigade. If something screws up and I have to throw him forward so I can get my skirmishers out of there, that's his job at this point. Johnny and I have talked a little bit in the past about doing something or other to make suiciding your allied units both less necessary and less beneficial. Haven't really come up with a good implementable solution yet. And for this battle, I don't know what I could possibly do to make me not end up throwing those units away, just because, at least in this stage, because it's the only reason I'm alive. They have to fight. So we're getting charged. Gonna drop in and out of the fortification a few times, see if I can use that to cancel. It doesn't work. So I'm just gonna sit there. I don't have a charge bonus on Bruce, or at least no charge perk. So I think it's better to sit in the fortification and take the charge that way than it is to countercharge. Bruce is certainly going to rout. Not sure what Tyler's doing here, but gift for me. See if I can finally get rid of him. Moving my extra Major General over so I can get the double regen bonus up here. If I remember correctly, that second regen bonus only applies half as much, but hey, anything's worth it in an area that I just cannot afford to leave. And starting to move the skirmishers forward, because I think I see the extent of their line. I'm going to start heading in on the side. Moving Loomis forward there into the open is really dangerous, but I think I can position him such that he can fire at those units without getting fired at himself. Hop in the fortification again, that's a mistake. But we broke both that charge, so now I'm really worried about Trabu? I don't know how you pronounce that, but that giant 4.5k unit. Finally got rid of that 10-pounder parrot that I've been going after for most of the battle, so that's great news. So I got to worry about Stuart, but my goal is if I can get Stuart out of the way, then I can start hitting that giant unit on the flank and hopefully keep him from trying to come in for melee, because if he comes in for melee, I don't know if I have enough men there to stop him. So really want to get flanking fire into him, so he's going to be degraded if nothing else. But overall, this is the basic setup that I'm going to use. try and flank around the sides. You can't do too much by the river, just the sight lines are bad. But most of the units tend to shift away from the river, especially with the gunboats firing at them. You can see I'm starting to focus fire all of my artillery on the units that are charging in, just to try and break them. So gonna head across, see what I can find back here. Hopefully not an infantry unit that I blunder right into while I'm paying attention to something else. But you can see this is why I'm focusing on that giant unit, because if that guy decides to charge on top of these guys, like that's the sort of charge that loses you the battle. Because you can see that, like, even if I throw a unit in front of them, they just tear right through it. So bringing all these up, bringing my backup units forward, letting the canister do its work. Spotted by something or other, so I'm stopping. So we got lucky that one guy shattered, even though he had 1,000 men left. That guy must have started out pretty big, but that removes one problem. And now we can, hopefully the next round of artillery will get that guy out of there. So I have to run away with the cavalry again. Gotta be real careful, because if that big unit starts firing at those units' flanks, they're gonna evaporate. So some charges in the back line is fine, as long as, rather than charge aimlessly after my cavalry than me blunder into them or something, or them go commit to the attack up here. Starting to trying to get rid of the artillery when I can, just because it is pretty close, and that's close enough that it's gonna, those 12-pounders are gonna hurt. But the good news is we have a 2-star and a 3-star sort of backing our line, so they're going to be able to do pretty well when something charges in. But we're having to throw some stuff forward in the center here that I really can't afford to have on the line anymore. We get another shatter, that's really good. Now we can really get after the big unit. And a lot of those units are out of ammo, which is going to help a lot. But we still have 4.5 hours to go, so still a lot of men to plow through. So I'm letting the cavalry rest just a little bit before I go after that artillery unit that I spotted. I don't know if that's another 10-pounder or just a unit that got stuck really far back or what happened, but... So this is the sort of situation that gets dangerous. We have all those units stacked up really close where they can support each other. And a charge could wipe me out. Especially, you can see, I think that's Chalmers or something further down there. Like, if that guy comes up as well. But we're starting to get really good damage on that big unit. Pausing Gibbon. I really want to try and get my cavalry to hit it about the same time. Going a little early, but... And then I see that infantry unit there and then immediately try and disengage, because if I take a volley, I might just die. So I've got 3 infantry units there under, well, I'll say 400 men. And at this point, I start considering, do I want to try and combine division where I lose the perk, and that's not great. Really lucky, Johnson must not have almost any accuracy perks or must have terrible weapons or something, because he did very little in that volley. I was expecting to lose far more men than that. So cleared out a little bit more. Starting to work on getting that artillery down. Taking a lot of losses, but this is starting to look promising in terms of getting through it. Though the center here is, this is the worrying part. Like, can I keep this going? So I'm starting to slide more units around. The upside of that is like they seem to be retreating more into the center and not going up to the north, which lets me slide more units around. The downside is that weakens my center and makes them more likely to charge through there. But I'm trying to get those units so they can get flanking shots. Because I have those the 2 allied musket units up front taking all the damage. And I really want those units behind them to be able to fire at something. That's why I have Scales and Walton both sort of slid out to the side a little bit, where they aren't really in cover, but they can hit stuff as they on the flanks as they come in. But you can see I'm really thinning out my line there. I don't really have much. Like when those front units fold, I really don't have anything behind them anymore. I have a couple of small musket units, and that's it. And everything over on this side is getting really small. It's like we're compressing everything into the middle, which is good, but just started to run out of men. But they're down to, what, 2 artillery units? 3 maybe? So that's good, because once we can get our counter battery focused on something else, I guess they have the most efficient infantry killers, but oh, got spotted, have to run. Really don't want to lose those JF Browns. But he's got to run across the river and through cover, and I should be able to make it out. So at this point I decide I'm not going to get anything more done with the cavalry on that side, so I'm bringing it out and around to help protect the skirmishers. But center's starting to fold some more. So took a shot with the JF Browns, but oh well. For such a tiny unit, they're doing all right. So the charge hits home. Probably going to lose Hazen. Might lose Bruce, Scherer, Anderson, but got to keep throwing units in there. So I just don't have anything. You can see I have nothing left behind there. So pulling all the artillery on that unit, hopefully I can stop it. Merging that unit so I can have another something or else to throw on the front line. Really trying to do what I can to prevent shatters at this point. Even if they go back into my army, I need that. I need the manpower on the field right now. So you can see another huge charge coming in. And now this is really worrying. Starting to bring units over from the far left to give myself something else in the back line here. Focus firing on the most dangerous unit. We get one stop. Anderson shatters. But we mostly slowed down Chalmers. And the only good news is now he's taking fire from both of my best rifle brigades. And he finally routs. So trying to get rid of the last of that artillery. End up switching targets when I realized that my 10-pounders and the 3-inch don't have range to hit it. I'd like to hit Claiborne with my cavalry if I can manage to, but again, they're so small, I have to be really careful with my targets at this point. Just trying to figure out what I can get away with, if I can pull anything from anywhere. Having to shift my 3-star unit back into the line. Not really who I want there, just because that guy's really expensive to replace. But, well, I don't have anything else left at the moment, so he's got to go. And that artillery unit has come up real close, which means he's doing a lot of damage to those units over there. And I just can't commit to him at the moment. But we held off that wave of charges, so doing all right. I'm not sure why I hopped Hazen into the fortifications there. Maybe I was trying to block fire on something. I don't remember. So I see him route, checking if I can get the cavalry in range. In retrospect, no way I was going to make it, so yep, cancel that. And, well, he recovers, decides that charging is a great idea. As far as I know, there's only a condition restriction on charging, not a morale restriction, so... And while logically it might make more sense to have it not be able to charge, usually the AI doesn't charge when it should versus charging when it shouldn't, and I would say overall. Speaking more in terms of, effective play for the AI rather than any sort of real life example. See, we're at half supply with that one unit. Don't know what my other supply wagon is sitting at. I probably brought more supply than I needed. I brought about 100,000 to the battle. Maybe I could have gotten away with less, but I wasn't sure how long. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to drag this into day 2 for quite a while. If I had to do that, then the extra supply was going to be very necessary. Because you can see that if my artillery in the center were to run out of ammunition, there's no way I could hold this off. The canister fire is pretty much all that is keeping the units out of the woods here. On the upside, we mostly got their flank gone. They're down to 2 artillery units, maybe 3. They're really starting to... My army's falling apart, but so's theirs. We've got a lot of units down into the close to shattering range, so... Which is good, because we just don't... I'm having to shift, I'm bringing Brooks into the center, because I just don't have anything left to hold, to take fire there anymore. And the reinforcements only arrive at about, I think, with 2 hours and 30 minutes left. Been debating if I should move that up a little bit. Maybe have them come in around 3 hours remaining, something like that. At the moment, I'm kind of leaning towards Shiloh might be a little too hard on Legendary. I came in with a pretty good army, had a pretty good RNG run, and abusing a lot of mechanics, and barely making it through this battle. But we'll see. I'm gonna let it sit for a little bit and see how other people do, and maybe there'll be some changes in the future. But for now, it's a good challenge. Lost another division commander. I'm letting the snipers recover, have them on hold fire, so I think they're exhausted at the moment. So you can, here's where you can see that, like, even though I have a ton of units sitting basically on top of the VP, like their units sitting below it are actually outnumbering mine, and so they're able to take the landing from me. But we're bringing some more units into the center. Actually, I probably should have moved my long range artillery outside of other than the 10-pounder up a little bit. Then they probably would have been doing a little bit better. But I spot that artillery unit and go after him. And you do need to make sure that that counter never goes down, because if that contested timer ever drops to 0, you automatically lose. Be kind of nice if it worked that way for the Confederates, but no luck. But even though, like, in a lot of ways, this battle is sort of over, like, most of their force is effectively destroyed, like, you can tell it's still actually fairly close in terms of numbers, just because those big, bulky infantry units probably have as many men as I have on the field right now. But thankfully, I've got a lot of artillery support, and I've got ammo, and they don't. So we're going to be able to, because their line is folding, I'm going to be able to bring the skirmishers in and just sort of roll the line from there. So that's another dangerous charge, because I just don't have much to hold it. But see, all that good work I was doing on that big unit paid off. He routes right away. So almost got the last of the artillery. And now it's probably over. They've got a little bit more. Maybe they could, at this point, they could probably destroy a couple of units. I don't think they could win. I guess I say this as they hold the landing, but I'm not too worried about it. I guess Jackson coming in is bad, but he's about to take a lot of fire in his flank, so he's going to go, and then after that, I think we get it back. Okay, so we almost went through one supply wagon. We have about half of the others, so probably about right. If this battle had gone on a little bit longer, if they'd had another, if this had been the 17K extra men they had in my 1.24 run through, I would probably need that ammunition. Though I'm not sure I'd have enough men to hold that number either, so hard to say. But they're definitely falling apart. We're able to just start swinging the flanks closed on both of them. I guess we get charged over there by that little tiny unit, but he's going to get wrecked by the variety of units over there. And now that we're on the flanks of this infantry, it's not going to stand around too long. And there goes that guy. So I may need to look at the damage on the ironclads. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little too low at the moment. Something to keep an eye on. If anyone watching is playing it, definitely something to keep an eye on and provide some feedback on. The ironclads got hit by the 40% general damage reduction to artillery, so that might have been a little too harsh for them. But all the rest of the artillery definitely needed it. So at this point, I could be pushing harder, but I actually kind of want to go to day 2. Also, I just going on the offensive, like having them walk right into this wonderful concave is just perfect. I don't need to take any more losses, so they can do that over and over. And for those officers that are wounded, I really want to go to day 2 because then they will heal and I'll have them available going forward. So I'm not sure what these units are doing going back to the west now. I don't know what they're after, but just going to move back out of their way. They can walk around if they want, and pretty soon we're just going to flip into fast forward and wait till the next day. Also, I think our reinforcements should be arriving pretty soon, so we can send them forward to die while we wait. So yeah, pulling all the snipers back, or the skirmishers back, we'll send the wagon over to fill them back up. And just wait. Just let the artillery farm some XP while they stand around. So, battle's over at this point. Oh, they see something or other. Yeah. Battle's definitely won. Just trying to make sure there aren't too many more casualties, because looking around, you see a whole lot of units that are sitting there with less than 500 men in them, which is normally a really, really bad thing. So we're going to have a lot of work ahead of us to put this army back together afterwards. But I'm fairly confident that I'm not too worried about any of the side battles and anything after this. So as long as I make it through with an army, I'm pretty sure I can make it from there. And I'm probably not going to play quite as small as I have in the past, but I'm also not going to be building big enough that I'm expecting to run into 3K plus units on a regular basis. So this should be the worst I'm outnumbered for the most of the campaign, unless some of the changes that I made end up changing something dramatically in some side battle that haven't tested yet. But that'd be a fun surprise. And if nothing else, trying to win the Battle of Salem Church, well, that I think it's technically possible on Legendary with the upgrades we made to that battle. Find out if I'm right. I've played it a couple of times. I've gotten close enough that I look at it and said, I think I can pull it off if I try it enough times, which is better than 1.24, where it was just literally impossible as far as I could tell. So we finally got all our units that are allied units that arrived on the field. If there was more of the AI left, they would be very useful for going forward and holding the line. And there's more allied units on the field, I think, than I have in my army right now. Those are actually going to skew the numbers in terms of the army that I brought quite a bit, because that's what 7,000, 9,000, 11,000 with the split, which is a third as many as I brought total. But just turning them off. I'm not worried about the battle at this point, so I'm just sending them forward and mostly turning them on hold fire, so the AI will work on killing them. This was actually an interesting test in terms of how the new charge logic works. The AI is pretty eager to try and charge these guys, even though it tends to lose. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with the calculation there, but okay, that was the end of the day. Facing less than 5,000, we've got 27,000 left. What we got. Go into camp briefly just to see the damage. We don't have any money. We don't have any officers, so not much we can really do. And we'll get perks out if we can. So yeah, not pretty. But lots of good XP, though I guess on a lot of units that I'm probably going to have to disband. Debating what perk I should go with here. Normally I'd probably go with the either horse artillery or canister, but I figured with the way the battle is, they're just going to be firing shell at this point anyways, so I just gave them the shell perk, and it's going to reset after the battle, and I'm probably going to disband that unit regardless. So I'm not sure what happens in this case with the replacement officer not having enough XP to give that unit a perk. I don't know for sure if when it goes into battle, if it has the perk or not. I think it still does, but I haven't checked for sure. Okay, so we've got the perks out. We don't have enough nothing we can do about officers, so go in and wrap up the second day. And I've accelerated this again, so basically just going to send all those reinforcements. One of the guys split again. So we're just going to send those all forward and then back up everything else so we don't take any damage to our own units, and just let the AI do what little it can before it dies. This can actually be pretty dangerous if there's actually AI forces remaining, just because they start so close to your line, and all of the fresh reinforcements start fairly far back. And since it's a random distribution of some kind, uh, you can have really beat up units on your front line, and the first couple of minutes to try and put an actual battle line together can be pretty rough. But in this case, there's nothing left, so it's fine. So, suicide in the cannons. You can see Forrest is going to be super eager to go charge us. So he's just going to come at us over and over until he surrenders, and there you go. So, that is almost 17k losses for about 50,000 kills. That's barely a 3-to-1 ratio compared to the last time where I fought 17k more men with about the same size army, and had almost a 9-to-1 ratio. I came in with about 21,000 of my own men. I'm leaving with about, I think I lost a little more than 1,100, which is over 50% casualties. You can see that 3-star unit did a lot of work. My 2-star artillery units did pretty well, but not as ridiculous as they did in 1.24, so I think that's a good balance. Maybe a little high still, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah, a lot of losses, pretty good numbers on a lot of those guys. I think Johnson was that unit who got into melee in the top right, or top left. Not sure about those other units. I don't remember them specifically. But overall, a lot of these units did pretty well considering a lot of them were just 0-star units. And definitely a bit more balanced damage coming out than in previous versions of the mod, which is good to see. Artillery is still very strong. Skirmishers can still be very strong, but the infantry's performing a little bit better, especially when you don't have the right type of perks on them. They're performing a little better overall, which is good to see. But also, I think it's safe to say that I got pretty lucky with the splits in terms of the AI unit splitting, because I was not facing too many more men on the first day in the 1.24 version. They just split like mad, and that's where most of that 17k more men came from. So definitely, I think if you get a really bad RNG roll on Shiloh now on Legendary, it's probably close to impossible. Actually, they must have had some 3-inch somewhere. I'm surprised that didn't do more damage. That could have been really rough. Decent mixture of stuff. A few parrots. I think the Napoleons were all mine. They had some 6-pounders. Got a bunch of sawed-offs. Probably do something or other with them. All right. Okay, well, we'll take a look at what we've got in camp. The Bear Remnants. So we got Grant, got some recruits. Also worth noting that in the current version of the mod, that would be 3 points of career points I was playing before that change had been fixed. So I'll have to go back and manually fix that to give myself the extra career point to go forward. But you will get 3 for this battle now, which I think is a good reward for how difficult it is. So yeah, my good units are in okay shape. Getting those guys infantry up again will be hard. That'll be expensive. And then everything else is kind of trash fire. like those infantry units are so low, I don't even know if I'm going to keep them. Like maybe I'll keep Tyler. I don't know. It's going to be a lot of money to try and boost them back up. I think it'd be better just to reconstitute them as fresh units and go from there. So yeah, really, really high losses. Fixing that cavalry is going to be hard. I might go back. I might drop below 2-star again with a couple of those units for a battle or two, just so I don't have to spend quite so much on veterans right away. Also worth noting, the command ratios shown here are slightly different than what you'll see in the live version. I tweaked stuff a little bit. So division commanders were slightly less impactful than they are currently. So those numbers might look a little different if you're trying to do a direct comparison. But that's should be the only changes from the live version. In terms of testing, I usually try and get through Shiloh on both sides, and then I'll spot check some other battles here and there. In general, I figure if I can make it through Shiloh on Legendary, then there's probably nothing else in the campaign that's really going to stop me. That's usually the hardest section, and anything else I'm fairly confident that I can pull off. So, and the amount of time it would take to test everything is ridiculous. So, thanks again to Christoph42 for helping me test a lot of the Major General campaigns on both sides. So yeah, that was Shiloh. It is a giant pain in the ass right now, but it's possible. Hope that was helpful. It showed a little more of the retreat that you didn't get to see in the 1.24 version. All right, I'll be continuing with more of the campaign. We'll see how far I end up going with it. But for now, that's it. Thanks for watching.